Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku was in Marvel Avengers. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. If you're going to become a hero, you don't have time for a timeout. All Might. Pain was the first constant. It was a familiar friend, a roommate that had moved into Izuku Midoriya's body months ago and refused to pay rent. But this pain was different. It wasn't the sharp, breaking snap of a bone under the pressure of One for All, nor was it the searing decay of Shigaraki's touch. It was the pain of existence being stretched thin. One moment, he had been suspended in the air above the ruins of Jaku City. The sky had been a bruised purple, choked with dust and the malice of the All-for-One quirk. Shigaraki, or the thing possessing Shigaraki, had lunged. Izuku had countered. The air had shattered. A warp gate, unstable and flickering with violent black and red energy, had blossomed between their colliding fists like a bruised flower. Then sound died. Light inverted. Gravity ceased to be a law and became a suggestion. Now, the sensation of stretching snapped back. Izuku gasped, his lungs inflating with air that tasted wrong. It tasted metallic, oily, and thick. He was falling. His eyes snapped open. The first thing he registered was the wind screaming in his ears, tearing at the tattered remains of his cowl. The second thing was the city below him. It was a sprawling grid of luminosity, a circuit board of amber and white light stretching into an infinite horizon. It was night, but the city burned with an artificial brilliance that rivaled the day. Skyscrapers pierced the cloud layer, needles of glass and steel that looked sharper, colder, and far more numerous than the skyline of Mizurafu or even Tokyo. Where am I? Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in his chest. He flailed his arms, the yellow Gran Torino cape, now shredded to a mere scarf, whipping violently against his neck. Altitude, approximately 2,000 feet. Terminal velocity approaching. His mind, sharpened by a year of war and survival, engaged before his emotions could catch up. Focus. Land first. Panic later. Float. He rasped, the command scraping his raw throat. He reached for the sensation of buoyancy, the gift of Nana Shimura. Usually it felt like being held by a warm hand, a gentle suspension. But now, it felt sluggish. The quirk responded, but it felt heavy, as if the air itself was fighting him. His descent slowed, but not enough. He was still plummeting, just with a little more drag. Something's wrong. The atmosphere? The gravity? No, the quirk itself. It feels distant. He needed an anchor. Black whip. Dark tendrils of energy erupted from his forearms, glowing with a faint teal bioluminescence. They lashed out into the night seeking purchase. One tendril snagged the corner of a gargoyle on a Gothic-style skyscraper. Another wrapped around a water tower on a lower rooftop. The tension hit him instantly. Snap. The force of the swing yanked his shoulders in their sockets. Izuku gritted his teeth, suppressing a scream. He swung through the canyon of steel, the momentum carrying him in a wide, dizzying arc. He released the whip, somersaulting through the air, and crashed onto a flat, gravel-covered rooftop. He didn't stick the landing. He tumbled, his iron-soled boots skidding on the wet gravel, rolling shoulder over shoulder until he slammed into a heavy HVAC unit. The metal dented with a hollow clang. Izuku lay there for a long moment, staring up at the sky. There were no stars. Just the dull, orange reflection of light pollution on low-hanging clouds. Danger sense didn't go off, he whispered to himself, his voice sounding small in the vast noise of the city below. The fourth user's quirk was usually a constant headache, a buzzing insect at the base of his skull warning him of Shigaraki's intent. Now? Silence. The buzzing was gone. Slowly, painfully, Izuku pushed himself up. His mid-gauntlets were cracked, the support items hanging loosely from his forearms. His costume, once a symbol of hope, was a wreck of dirt, dried blood, and soot. He looked less like a hero and more like a survivor of a natural disaster. He limped to the edge of the roof and looked down. The streets were gridlocked with yellow taxis. The cars looked archaic. Internal combustion engines dominated the noise profile. There were no holographic advertisements, no floating displays. The billboards were massive, static, purely digital screens. Coca-Cola, Stark Industries, Roxxon, Pimtech. He didn't recognize half the brands. And the ones he did recognize looked different. The fonts were sharper, the aesthetic more aggressive, but it was what was missing that made his stomach drop. There were no hero agencies. In a city this size, this had to be New York, or a version of it. There should have been hero patrols. He should see empty lady on a billboard, or a PSA from the American hero Star and Stripe. He should see sidekicks running rooftop logistics. He saw nothing. Just police cruisers with flashing red and blue lights, weaving through traffic. Is this a simulation? Izuku muttered, tapping the side of his mask. Did the warp quirk throw me into an illusion quirk? He closed his eyes and reached inward, into the vestige world. One for All was there, a roaring bonfire of power in his chest, but the voices of the predecessors were silent. It was as if they were in a deep sleep, or disconnected. Okay. Breath. Analyze. Hypothesis 1. I am in a villain's territory where hero society has collapsed. Unlikely. The infrastructure is too intact. Hypothesis 2. I've been transported to the past. Possible. The cars look older. Hypothesis 3. I'm not home. A chill wind swept over the rooftop, cutting through his suit. Izuku hugged himself, shivering. The darkness inside him, the exhaustion of the dark Deku crusade, weighed heavy. He wanted a bath. He wanted to hear All Might's voice. He wanted to see his mom. Bzzzzzt. The sensation hit him like an ice pick to the temple. Izuku doubled over, clutching his head. Danger sense. It was back, but it felt different. Sharper. Less like a vague malice and more like a precise radar ping. Danger. Close. 2 blocks east. High intensity. His body moved before his mind consented. The conditioning of a hero, ingrained into his very marrow, took over. Exhaustion was shoved into a box and locked away. Green lightning crackled around his body. One for all, full cowling. 5%. It was all he could muster without risking a blackout, but it was enough. The gravel beneath his boots crunched as he loaded tension into his legs. I have to check it out, he whispered. I have to know. He leaped. The city of New York, Earth 199999, was a city that had seen aliens fall from the sky, gods destroy its streets, and robots lift entire countries into the air. It was a city with thick skin, but it had never seen anything quite like Izuku Midoriya. He moved across the rooftops like a green phantom. His movements were a blend of parkour and Gran Torino's jet propulsion style. He didn't fly. He bounced, creating invisible platforms of pressure that carried him forward. The source of the danger was a loading dock behind a high-end electronics warehouse in Queens. Izuku landed silently on a fire escape overlooking the alley. He crouched, blending into the shadows, his eyes scanning the scene. Below, a heavy transport truck had been waylaid. The rear doors were blown open, literally melted off their hinges. 5 men were moving crates from the truck into a waiting black van. They weren't your average thugs. They wore heavy, distinct trench coats and tactical masks. But it was their weapons that made Izuku's notebook brain go into overdrive. One man held a rifle that didn't fire bullets. It hummed with a violet, unstable energy. The barrel looked like it was scavenged from something organic and then fused with human technology. Chitauri Tech, the local media called it. Izuku, of course, called it advanced unidentified support gear with distinct energy emission signatures similar to high-end heat quirks. Hurry it up, one of the men growled. The spiders or the Tin Man could show up any second. Relax, Toombs said the Avengers are busy upstate. Something about a diplomatic meeting, another replied, hoisting a crate marked DODC. Do not open. Avengers? Izuku filed the word away. A team name? Like the Wild Pussycats? One of the thugs turned, aiming his weapon at the terrified truck driver who was cowering on the wet asphalt. No witnesses, the thug said, the weapon charging up with a high-pitched whine. Izuku didn't think. Smash! He kicked off the fire escape. The metal grating screamed under the pressure. He descended like a missile. He didn't aim for the man. He aimed for the space between the man and the driver. He landed in a crouch, the impact cracking the asphalt. The shockwave knocked the thug backward, sending the glowing rifle skittering across the ground. Silence descended on the alley. The 4 remaining thugs froze. They stared at the figure in the center of the crater. The green lightning arcing off Izuku illuminated the alley in strobing flashes, casting long, erratic shadows. Izuku stood up slowly. His eyes glowed eerie green from within the cowl. "Step away from the civilian," Izuku said. His voice was rough, distorted by his mask and his own fatigue. He tried to sound like All Might, commanding, reassuring. Instead, he sounded like something haunting. "What the hell is that?" one thug yelled. "Is that a mutant? Blast him." The thugs raised their weapons. Danger sense, 4 vectors. High-velocity thermal energy. Izuku moved. To the thugs, he simply vanished. To Izuku, the world slowed down. He channeled one for all into his legs. Gran Torino style. He zigzagged across the alley, bouncing off the brick walls. He appeared behind the first gunman. Controlled strike. Don't break bones. Just incapacitate. He delivered a chop to the man's neck. The armor was thicker than he expected, Kevlar weave with ceramic plating. Izuku adjusted instantly, adding a kinetic pulse to the strike. The man folded like a lawn chair. The second thug fired. A bolt of violet plasma scorched the air where Izuku's head had been a microsecond before. The heat was intense, hotter than Bakugo's explosions, but without the concussive force. Black whip! 2 tendrils shot out, wrapping around the weapon's barrel. With a sharp yank, Izuku tore the gun from the thug's grip and flung it into a dumpster. He followed up with a sweeping leg kick, knocking the man's legs out from under him. "What is this guy?" The third thug screamed, backing up toward the van. "He's moving too fast. Just shoot everything." The remaining 2 opened fire blindly. Violet bolts tore up the asphalt, melted the brick walls, and shattered the windows of the warehouse above. Izuku shielded the truck driver with his body. He spun, using his cape as a distraction, though it was barely more than a rag now. "I can't let them hit the civilian. I have to end this now." Manchester. Smash! Izuku leaped directly over the incoming fire. He flipped in the air, bringing his heel down on the hood of the getaway van. Boom! The engine block crumbled. The van's front end was flattened into the pavement. The shockwave lifted the 2 remaining thugs off their feet and threw them into the brick wall. They slumped to the ground, unconscious. Silence returned to the alley, save for the hissing of the melted asphalt and the groaning of the destroyed van. Izuku stood on the wreckage, his chest heaving. The green lightning faded, leaving only the steam rising from his body. He hopped down and turned to the truck driver. The man was a middle-aged New Yorker, balding, wearing a uniform that said damage control. Izuku extended a hand. He tried to smile, though he knew his mask hid it. "Are you okay?" "You're safe now." The driver didn't take his hand. He scrambled backward, his eyes wide with terror. He looked at Izuku, at the torn, dirty suit, the metal gauntlets, the eerie green eyes, and he didn't see a hero. "Stay back!" The driver screamed. "Don't kill me! I don't have anything." Izuku froze. "No, I'm a hero. I saved you. You're one of them." The man yelled, scrambling to his feet and backing away, tripping over debris. "You're a freak. A mutate freak." The word hit Izuku harder than the warp gate had. I'm Deku," Izuku stammered, his hand still outstretched. "I'm a pro-hero from Uei. Police!" A voice amplified by a loudspeaker boomed from the street entrance of the alley. "NYPD! Drop the weapon and put your hands in the air." Bright white spotlights blinded him. Red and blue lights reflected off the wet walls. Izuku squinted against the glare. 3 police cruisers had blocked the alley entrance. Officers were crouching behind their doors, guns drawn. And they weren't holding tasers. They were holding military-grade carbines. "He's an enhanced individual," one officer shouted. "Target is hostile. I repeat, target has destroyed a vehicle." "Wait!" Izuku raised his hands, palms open. "I'm not hostile. I stopped the robbery. Those men, they have illegal weapons." Bang! A warning shot ricocheted off the metal dumpster next to him. "Get on the ground. Now!" Izuku looked at the officers. He looked at the truck driver, who was running toward the police, pointing back at Izuku and shouting about green lightning. His heart hammered against his ribs. This wasn't right. In Japan, even vigilantes were usually given a chance to explain before lethal force was threatened. Here, the fear was palpable. The police looked at him with the same intensity they would look at Anoma. They don't know me. They don't know All Might. Heroes aren't trusted here. Danger sense flared again. Not from the police, but from the sky. Something fast was approaching. I can't get arrested, Izuku whispered. Not until I figure out how to get home. He looked at the officers one last time. I'm sorry. Smoke screen. Purple smoke exploded from his body, filling the alleyway in an instant. It was thick, choking, and impenetrable. Hold fire. Can't see target. Gas. He's using gas. Under the cover of the smoke, Izuku shot a black whip to the roof. He yanked himself upward, disappearing into the night just as the police rushed the smoke cloud. He didn't stop running until he was 5 miles away. Izuku collapsed in the shadow of a water tower on a building in Midtown. He slid down the cool metal, pulling his knees to his chest. His adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a crushing fatigue. His stomach growled loudly. He hadn't eaten since before the raid on the hospital. He pulled his mask off, gasping for cool air. His messy green hair was matted with sweat and dust. He looked at his hands. They were trembling. Why were they so scared? He asked the empty air. He reached into one of his yellow utility pouches. It was a habit, checking for supplies. He found a half-crushed nutritional bar he had stashed weeks ago. He tore it open and ate it in 2 bites. It tasted like cardboard, but it helped. He pulled out his phone. The screen was cracked, but it powered on. No signal. Of course, he muttered. Different cell towers. Or different frequencies. He tapped the screen, bringing up his notes app. He needed to organize his thoughts. He needed to be Deku the analyst, not Deku the scared teenager. Fact 1, no quirks. The people he saw on the street, the police, the driver, none of them showed signs of quirks. No heteromorphic features. No passive emissions. The thugs used technology to replicate powers. Fact 2, hostility. Vigilantism seems heavily criminalized. Or perhaps enhanced people are feared. The term mutate was used as a slur. Fact 3, technology gap. The energy weapons were advanced, but the cars and phones were behind. It was a contradictory world. He stood up and walked to the edge of the roof. The city was still awake. He saw a massive tower in the distance, distinct from the others. It had a landing pad near the top, and a large, glowing logo on the side. Avengers, he whispered. The thugs had mentioned them. If there were heroes in this world, that was where they lived. He considered going there, asking for help. But the image of the terrified truck driver stopped him. If the police shot on sight, would these Avengers be any different? He was a foreign element, an unknown variable with enough power to level a city block. I need information first. I need to observe. He scanned the streets below. He saw a newsstand. The headline on a discarded newspaper caught his eye, even from this height, thanks to his enhanced vision. Sokovia Memorial, 1 month later. Sokovia? He didn't know the name. Suddenly, a digital billboard on the building opposite him flickered. The ad for Coca-Cola vanished, replaced by a news alert. Breaking news, vigilante activity reported in Queens. Police described suspect as a dangerous enhanced male, possibly connected to the recent spike in illegal weapon trade. Grainy footage from a security camera played. It showed a blur of green lightning destroying the van. It looked violent. It looked uncontrolled. That's not what happened, Izuku pleaded to the screen. Then, the screen changed again. A live feed appeared. A man with a mustache and a cigar was shouting at the camera. Jonah Jameson here with the Daily Bugle. You see this, folks? Another freak. Another masked menace terrorizing our streets. We don't need another Spider-Man. We don't need more vigilantes acting above the law. These superpowered punks think they own this city. Izuku stepped back. Spider-Man? So there were others. He sat back down, wrapping his tattered cape around his shoulders. He felt incredibly small. He was in a world that didn't know All Might. A world where plus ultra meant nothing. Mom, he whispered, his voice cracking. All might. Guys, he closed his eyes, fighting back tears. He couldn't cry. Crying wasted hydration. Crying didn't solve the problem. He had to survive. He had to patrol. Even if they hated him, he had to save them. That was the pact he made with One for All. You save everyone. Even the ones who don't want to be saved. Upstate New York, the new Avengers facility. Boss, you might want to see this. Tony Stark looked up from the holographic schematic of the Mark 46 armor. He wiped grease from his hands with a rag. The lab was quiet, save for the hum of the arc reactor powering the building and the soft whirring of Dummy the robot arm, who was failing to sweep the floor properly. FRIDY. I explicitly said I was in do not disturb mode unless the world was ending, or unless Pepper was calling. Is the world ending? Not currently, boss. But local authorities in Queens just reported a Class 4 energy signature. Tony raised an eyebrow. Class 4? That's Hulk level. Did Banner stub his toe? Dr. Banner is currently in the mess hall eating yogurt. This signature is new. And it's weird. Define weird. The energy output is bioelectric, somewhat similar to Thor's lightning, but the wavelength doesn't match Asgardian's signatures. It also carries a trace of something else. Something ancient. Tony swiped his hand through the air, dismissing the armor schematics. Show me. A video window popped up. It was the security footage from the Queen's alleyway. Tony watched in silence as the blurry figure dropped from the sky. He watched the green lightning arc. He watched the Manchester smash flat in the van. Pause, Tony commanded. The hologram froze at the moment of impact. Tony zoomed in. He enhanced the image, sharpening the pixels until the figure was clear. It was a kid in a bunny-eared hood that looked like it had been through a shredder. He was wearing metal gauntlets that looked surprisingly sophisticated, bulky, but engineered for stress distribution. And under the hood, Tony could just make out a mess of green hair and eyes that glowed with terrifying intensity. FRIDY. Run facial rec. Running. No matches in the global database. No shield files. No HYDRA files. He's a ghost. Tony leaned back in his chair, rubbing his goatee. The kid moved like a pro. That impact wasn't a tantrum. It was a calculated strike to disable the vehicle. But the power output, that lightning, Tony muttered. That's not tech. That's biological. He thought about the twins. Wanda and Pietro. The experiments with the Mind Stone. Is Strucker's data completely gone? Yes, boss. Then where did this kid come from? Tony stood up. The relaxed, tinkering genius vibe vanished, replaced by the Iron Man. Get Cap on the line. And tell Vision to stop phasing through walls, it creeps me out. We have a situation. Shall I deploy the Iron Legion? No, Tony said, watching the footage loop again, specifically the moment where the kid shielded the truck driver from the plasma fire. He protected the civilian. He didn't kill the bad guys. Tony grabbed a tablet and started calculating the force trajectory of the kid's jump. He's scared. And he's powerful. That's a bad combination. Let's find him before Ross finds him. Tony walked toward the suit-up gantry. And FRIDY. Yes, boss? Keep an eye on Parker. If this green lightning guy is in Queens, he's in the spider's web. I don't want the kid getting squashed. Tony stepped onto the platform as the Mark 43 armor began to assemble around him. The faceplate hissed shut, the HUD lighting up his vision. New York City. Always the center of the universe. The thrusters fired. An Iron Man blasted out of the facility, streaking toward the city lights like a falling star in reverse. Back in the city, high above the noise, Izuku Midoriya stood up. His danger sense was quiet for now. The pain in his body was a dull roar, manageable. He looked out at the alien city. He clenched his fist, the green sparks dancing between his fingers. I'm here, he said to the silence. I don't know why, and I don't know how. But I am here. He pulled the tattered mask back over his face. And I'm going to be a hero. He leaped into the darkness, a streak of green lightning falling through the gray world. When you can do the things that I can, but you don't, and then the bad things happen? They happen because of you. Peter Parker, Queens, New York. To the untrained eye, it was just another borough, a sprawl of brick row houses, elevated train tracks, and the constant, rhythmic hum of a working-class existence. But to Peter Parker, it was a biological ecosystem. It breathed. It had a pulse. Tonight, that pulse was skipping a beat. Perched atop a faded billboard advertising Tony's Pizza, best slice in town, Peter adjusted the homemade goggles of his suit. It wasn't much to look at. A red sleeveless hoodie over a blue long-sleeved shirt, sweatpants, and distinct red boots. It was the onesie, as the internet trolls called it. But it worked. Karen isn't online because I don't have a Karen, Peter mumbled to himself, squinting through the shifting lenses. Just me. Just Peter. Talking to myself on a roof at 2 a.m. Totally normal behavior. He was supposed to be studying for a Spanish quiz. Instead, he was obsessing over police chatter. For the last hour, the NYPD band had been screaming about a green ghost. Reports were coming in from all over. A blur of lightning near the bodega on 21st, a shattered fire escape on 34th, and most concerningly, a group of high-tech arms dealers found unconscious and webbed up, except not with webs. With black, rope-like energy that dissolved after 10 minutes. Not my webs, Peter whispered, tapping his wrist shooter. And definitely not Harry's goblin tech. So who is the new guy? He stood up, the soles of his boots sticking perfectly to the metal sign. The wind whipped at his hoodie strings. Then it happened. The hairs on his arms stood up. The base of his neck prickled with a cold, electric sensation. The spidey sense. It dialed up from a low hum to a sudden, sharp violin screech. Danger! Whoa! Peter backflipped instinctively. A split second later, the metal platform where he had been standing crumpled inward. Not from an explosion, but from the sheer air pressure of something landing on it. Peter landed in a crouch 10 feet away, shooting a web line to a nearby chimney for stability. He looked at the crater. Standing there, shrouded in steam and the faint smell of ozone, was the green ghost. Up close, the guy looked less like a ghost and more like a wreck. He was short, maybe Peter's height, wearing a costume that had seen war. The bunny-eared cowl was torn, revealing messy green hair. Metal gauntlets that looked heavy enough to crush a car hung from his arms. And his eyes, they glowed. A piercing, toxic green that cut through the shadows. Okay, Peter said, his voice cracking slightly. I'm gonna guess you're not here to deliver a pizza. The figure didn't laugh. He didn't even speak. He just tilted his head, calculating. Izuku Midoriya was exhausted. His bones ached with a deep, marrow-level throb. He had been running for 2 hours, trying to find a safe place to rest, but danger sense wouldn't leave him alone. Every time he stopped, it buzzed, and now, it was screaming. Fourth user's warning, immediate threat. Ahead, but this threat was confusing. Izuku stared at the person in front of him. A boy in a red hoodie and welding goggles? He looked like a vigilante cosplayer, yet Izuku's analysis quirk, his brain, was firing on all cylinders. Observation. The subject dodged before I landed. Hypothesis. Sensory quirk? Precognition? Reflex enhancement? Threat level unknown. Who are you? Izuku asked, his voice rough. Why are you following me? Me following you? The boy in red pointed a gloved finger at his own chest. Buddy, you just cratered my favorite thinking spot, and you're the one matching the description of the guy who turned a van into a pancake earlier. Izuku shifted his stance. The gravel crunched under his iron soles. I stopped criminals. I saved a civilian. Yeah, well, the police seem to think you're a terrorist, the boy said, his lenses narrowing mechanically. And frankly, the glowing eyes aren't helping the friendly neighbor vibe. So, why don't you put your hands up, and we can wait for the cops to sort this out? I can't do that, Izuku said softly. I don't have time. Danger sense spike. Simultaneously, Peter's spidey sense spike. It was a feedback loop. Two precognitive abilities reading each other's intent to attack, triggering a reaction, which triggered a new warning. The air between them seemed to vibrate. Don't make me do this, Peter warned, his wrist flexing. I have to keep moving, Izuku replied, green electricity sparking around his skin. One for all, full cowling. 8%. Thwip. Peter fired. A strand of synthetic webbing shot out at bullet speed, aiming for Izuku's chest. Izuku didn't just dodge, he vanished. Using the elasticity of one for all, he dropped low, letting the web sail over his head, and lunged forward. Whoa, fast! Peter yelped, leaping straight up into the air, way higher than a normal human should. He stuck to the side of a water tower. Izuku didn't slow down. He kicked off the billboard, shattering the lights, and engaged Black Whip. 2 teal tendrils shot out, latching onto the water tower's struts. With a heave, Izuku pulled himself up, turning his momentum into a spinning heel kick aimed at the boy in red. Peter dropped from the wall, twisting in midair. Okay, we're fighting. We're definitely fighting. He fired 2 webs, catching Izuku's ankles. Gotcha! No, Izuku muttered. He activated float. Suddenly, the gravity pulling him down vanished. He halted in midair, disrupting the physics of Peter's pull. Peter, expecting the weight of a falling body, was jerked forward by his own web line. What the physics glitch? Peter shouted as he flew toward Izuku. Izuku met him with a palm strike, not a punch, but a gust of wind pressure. Air Force. Boom. The compressed air hit Peter in the chest, sending him tumbling backward across the rooftop. He rolled, recovered, and skidded to a halt, digging his fingers into the tar paper. Okay, Peter wheezed, tapping his chest. That was rude. And windy. Are you an airbender? Please tell me you're an airbender. Izuku landed on the edge of the roof, breathing heavily. Stop attacking me. I'm not your enemy. You attack cops and blow up vans. Peter yelled, firing a rapid barrage of web pellets. Thwip 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 thwip. Izuku weaved through them. His movements were jagged, efficient. He analyzed the projectiles as they flew past. Synthetic polymer. High tensile strength. Sticky. Emitter type? Or support item? He noticed the mechanical devices on the boy's wrists. Support items. No quirk. He's a quirkless hero. The thought made Izuku pause for a microsecond. In that fraction of a second, Peter Parker closed the distance. Peter was strong. He held back. He always held back, but he was fast. He slid under Izuku's guard and delivered a sweep kick. Izuku jumped, but Peter used the momentum to handstand spring upward, landing a double-footed kick to Izuku's crossed gauntlets. The impact was heavy. Izuku slid back 10 feet. He's strong, Izuku realized. Physically stronger than me without one for all at high percentages. Give up! Peter shouted, shooting a web line that snagged Izuku's left gauntlet. This time, Peter anchored the web to a heavy AC unit and pulled. Izuku was tethered. Black Whip! Izuku shouted. 6 tendrils exploded from his back. 2 slashed the web line, cutting it. The other 4 lashed out like angry vipers, striking at the environment to create debris, creating a visual screen. Whoa, okay, Dr. Octopus vibe, do not like. Peter flipped backward, dodging the black tendrils. The feedback loop in their heads was becoming deafening. Buzz. Ring. Scream. Izuku clutched his head. Get out of my head! Peter stumbled, shaking his cowl. Stop broadcasting. You're making my brain itch. They circled each other on the rooftop, 2 champions of responsibility locked in a misunderstanding. Last chance, Peter said, crouching low in his classic spider pose. Stay down. I have to find a way home, Izuku said, electricity crackling to 15%. The pressure cracked the roof beneath him. I can't stay down. He prepared to launch. Peter prepared to intercept. Crack. The sound didn't come from them. It came from the street below. A high-pitched metallic screech echoed through the canyon of buildings, followed by a terrified scream. Both heroes froze. The danger sense and the spidey sense aligned instantly. The antagonistic buzzing vanished, replaced by a singular, directional warning. Below. Civilian in peril. Without a word, without a signal, they both moved. They sprinted to the edge of the roof and looked down. 10 stories down, a window-washing platform on the adjacent high-rise had snapped a cable. The platform was dangling vertically, swinging wildly in the wind. A man was clinging to the railing by one hand, slipping. Oh God, Peter gasped. The man's hand slipped. He fell. No! Izuku screamed. He didn't think about the police. He didn't think about the fight. He dove off the roof. Wait, I got him! Peter yelled, diving right next to him. They fell in tandem. The wind roared. The man was plummeting fast. He was going to hit the pavement in 3 seconds. Webs won't reach in time. Peter calculated. I have to dive faster. He tucked his limbs into streamline. I need speed, Izuku gritted his teeth. Fa Gene. Build up kinetic energy. He kicked the air, using the air pressure to propel himself downward faster than terminal velocity. They reached the falling man at the exact same moment, 20 feet above the ground. Peter shot a web upward, anchoring it to a gargoyle. He wrapped his free arm around the man's waist. Gotcha! But the momentum was too great. The sudden stop would snap the man's spine or Peter's web line. Izuku saw the physics problem instantly. Black Whip! Izuku shot his tendrils upward, not to catch the building, but to catch Peter's web line. He created a secondary anchor point, creating a V shape to distribute the tension. Simultaneously, he fired an air force blast at the ground below them to create a cushion of updraft. Thump! They came to a halt 5 feet above the sidewalk. It wasn't a graceful stop. It was a tangled mess of webs, black energy, and limbs, but it was soft. The man, hyperventilating and pale, dangled safely in Peter's arm. Slowly, Peter lowered them to the ground. The man collapsed, kissing the dirty concrete. Oh, thank God, thank God. The man sobbed. Peter hung upside down from his web for a second, then flipped to the ground. He looked at his hands, shaking slightly. That was close. Too close. He looked up. Izuku was standing a few feet away. The green lightning was gone. The black tendrils had retracted. He was hunched over, clutching his right arm. The recoil from the sudden stop had aggravated his old injuries, panting. The silence between them was different now. The hostility had evaporated, replaced by the silent language of the save. Peter stepped forward. You helped. You cushioned the stop. If you hadn't done that air blast thing, the G-force would have hurt him. Izuku straightened up, wincing. You caught him. I just adjusted the math. Peter stared at him. The lenses of his goggles widened. You saved him. You could have run away. The cops are coming. But you dove. Izuku looked at the sobbing window washer, then back at Peter. He needed help. That's what we do. That's what we do. Peter Parker felt a smile tug at the corner of his mouth under his mask. Yeah, it is. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting louder. We should go, Peter said. I know a spot. Unless you want to explain the glowing eyes to the NYPD. Izuku hesitated, his danger sense humming a low, steady warning about the approaching cars. He looked at the boy in red. For the first time since arriving in this world, his intuition didn't scream threat. It whispered ally. Okay, Izuku said. Lead the way. Delmar's Deli Grocery, rooftop. 20 minutes later, the adrenaline crash was real. Izuku sat on a plastic milk crate, his back against a brick chimney. He had deactivated one for all completely. Without the power coursing through him, he looked small. Frail, even. The tattered remains of his costume hung loosely off his scarred frame. Peter sat opposite him on a ventilation duct, holding 2 full-wrapped packages. Okay, Peter said, tossing one to Izuku. Mr. Delmar was closed, but he lives downstairs and I have standing privileges. It's a number 5. Best sandwich in Queens. Maybe the world. Definitely better than whatever they eat in Jersey. Izuku caught the sandwich. The smell of roast pork, ham, and pickles hit him, and his stomach let out a roar so loud it could have been a quirk activation. Peter snorted. Yeah, I thought so. Metabolism thing? I have to eat like 5,000 calories a day or I pass out. Izuku tore into the sandwich. He didn't speak until half of it was gone. It was delicious. It tasted like real food, not ration bars or hospital jelly. Thank you, Izuku said, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. I haven't eaten properly in days. Don't mention it, Peter said, pulling his mask up just enough to expose his mouth and nose to take a bite. He didn't take the mask off fully. So, Deku was it? That's your name? Hero name, Izuku corrected. It means, well, it used to mean useless. Now it means you can do it. Peter chewed thoughtfully. I'm Spider-Man. But everyone calls me Spidey. Or the Spider-Menace if you read the Bugle. Spider-Man, Izuku repeated. He reached for his hip pouch, realized his notebook was burned to ash, and sighed. He tapped his temple instead. Emitter type? Or mutation? You produce the webs organically? What? No. Gross. Peter laughed. If they came out of me, where would they come from? Don't answer that. No, I make the fluid. It's a chemical compound. Shear thinning fluid, solidifies on contact with air, dissolves after 2 hours. Izuku's eyes lit up. The dark Deku gloom lifted for a second, replaced by the fanbow within. You made it? The tensile strength must be incredible to support the dynamic load of a swinging human, plus the impact force. How do you store it? High-pressure cartridges? Peter blinked. Yeah? Exactly. I synthesize it in chem lab. I mean in my lab. Secret lab. He cleared his throat. Wait, what's an emitter type? Izuku paused. He looked at Peter, really looked at him. Your quirk. Your power. Is it a mutation of your DNA, or an external emission? Peter tilted his head. I got bit by a radioactive spider. Changed my DNA. Sticky hands, super strength, danger sense. But the webs are tech. Radioactive spider. Izuku muttered. That sounds like a comic book origin from the pre-quirk era. Pre-quirk? Peter put his sandwich down. Okay, Greenie. You keep using that word. Quirk. What is a quirk? Izuku froze. He looked out at the skyline. The Stark Tower, Avengers Tower, loomed in the distance. Where I come from, Izuku began, his voice quiet. 80% of the population has a supernatural ability. We call them quirks. It's normal. Being quirkless is the anomaly. Peter stared at him. 80%? Everyone? Like, even the mailman? Yes. Some can breathe fire. Some can float. Some just have long fingers. Izuku looked at his own scarred hands. I was born quirkless. I was given my power later. Given? Peter leaned forward. It's complicated, Izuku said, guarding the secret of one for all even here. But I don't think I'm in my world anymore. The history, the heroes. All Might. Do you know who All Might is? Peter shook his head. Sounds like a deodorant brand. Or a protein shake. Izuku slumped. He's the symbol of peace. The greatest hero. If he doesn't exist here, we have the Avengers, Peter offered. Iron Man, Captain America. Thor, he's a literal god. With a hammer. Or he had a hammer? I think his sister broke it. It's a whole drama. Avengers, Izuku tested the word. They protect this world, mostly. They handle the big stuff. Aliens. Killer robots. Cities falling from the sky, Peter gestured vaguely. I handle the little stuff. Bike thieves. Lost grandmas. Window washers. Izuku looked at Peter with renewed respect. You're a vigilante. Like me. Operating without a license. Technically, yeah, Peter admitted. Mr. Stark, Iron Man, he kinda keeps an eye on me. Gave me an upgrade, but I'm in training. Or something. I'm keeping it low profile. Izuku stood up and walked to the edge of the roof. This world, it feels fragile. The people are scared of power. They're scared of what they don't understand, Peter said, joining him. When the aliens attacked in 2012, it changed everything. People realized they weren't alone. And that they were small. It's the same everywhere, Izuku whispered. Fear breeds chaos. But that's why we're here, right? Peter bumped Izuku's shoulder with his own. To catch them when they fall. Izuku looked at the Spider-Man mask. He saw the same spirit that lived in Mirio, in Uraraka, in All Might. Yeah, Izuku managed a small, genuine smile. That's why we're here. So, Peter clapped his hands. Dimension hopping. That's heavy. Multiverse theory is, well, it's theoretical. But if you're here, it proves the Einstein-Rosen bridge concepts could apply to. Whoosh. The sound was distinct. It wasn't the wind. It was the high-pitched whine of a repulsor engine. Peter stiffened. Oh no. Izuku's danger sense flared. Powerful entity. Above, a bright light flooded the rooftop, casting long shadows behind them. Descending from the clouds like a knight in red and gold armor was Iron Man. The suit, The Mark 43 hovered silently, the thrusters pulsing with white light. The faceplate hissed and slid up. Tony Stark looked tired. He looked at Peter, then at Izuku. "Underoos," Tony said, his voice amplified by the suit's speakers. "Past your bedtime. And I see you've brought a stray puppy, Mr. Stark." Peter stammered, stepping in front of Izuku instinctively. "Wait, don't shoot. He's a good guy. He helped me save a guy. We ate sandwiches." Tony landed on the roof with a heavy clank. The suit stepped forward. Izuku tensed. He felt the power of the man in the suit. It wasn't biological power. It was the power of sheer, unadulterated intelligence weaponized. "Good guy?" Tony looked at Izuku. "The police report says he hospitalized 5 men and destroyed a Dodge Sprinter. Which, granted, was a terrible car, but still property damage. They were selling Chitauri weapons," Izuku said, his voice steady. He didn't back down. He stood straight, despite the pain. They were going to hurt people. Tony studied him. The suit's scanners were running a mile a minute. Heart rate, elevated but steady. Cortisol levels, high. Bone density, abnormal. Energy signature, off the charts. "You've got some heavy tech on your arms, kid," Tony noted. "And you glow in the dark. You a science experiment? Hydra? AIM? I'm a hero," Izuku said. "From Yue High School. Class 1A. Yue High?" Tony frowned. "Never heard of it. And I know every prep school from here to Timbuktu." "He's from another dimension," Peter blurted out. Tony paused. He looked at Peter. He looked at Izuku. He looked back at Peter. "Another dimension," Tony deadpanned. "Okay. That's a new one. I was expecting super soldier serum gone wrong or radioactive gerbil, but sure. Multiverse. It's true," Izuku said. "I was fighting a villain with a warp quirk. I fell through a singularity." Tony rubbed his temples, or rather, the side of his helmet. "FRIDY, tell me I'm hallucinating. Energy residue on the subject is consistent with theoretical wormhole travel, boss. It matches the energy signature Dr. Selvig recorded in London, but more chaotic." Tony sighed. The skepticism in his eyes shifted to curiosity, and then to concern. He looked at Izuku's battered state. The blood on the torn cowl. The trembling hands. "Kid," Tony said, his voice softer. "You look like you went 12 rounds with the Hulk." "I can keep fighting," Izuku said automatically. "Yeah, that's exactly what I was afraid of," Tony muttered. The faceplate slid back down. "Okay. Here's the deal. You're coming with us." "I'm not going to prison," Izuku warned, green sparks flaring. "Relax, Green Lantern," Tony raised a hand. "Not prison. Upstate. The compound. Better food than Delmar's, softer beds, and a lab where we can figure out why you're vibrating at a frequency that shouldn't exist." Peter turned to Izuku. "You should go with him. Mr. Stark is the smartest guy on the planet. If anyone can get you home, it's him." Izuku looked at Peter. He trusted the spider. "Okay," Izuku said, powering down. "I'll come." "Great," Tony said. "Peter, go home. Finish your homework. Aunt May is going to kill me if she finds out you're out this late. But, go. I'll text you." Peter sighed. He shot a web to the next building. He looked back at Izuku. "Hey, Deku?" Izuku looked up. "Welcome to the neighborhood." Peter swung away into the night. Tony extended a metal hand toward Izuku. "Grab on, kid. It's a long flight. Try not to throw up in the suit. It's a nightmare to clean." Izuku took the armored hand. "Thank you," Izuku whispered. "Don't thank me yet," Tony said as the thrusters flared. "Let's see what you really are first." They lifted off, leaving the lights of Queens behind, heading toward the dark, quiet woods of upstate New York. Toward the Avengers. And for the first time in days, Izuku allowed himself to close his eyes. Data doesn't lie. But sometimes, it tells a story you aren't ready to believe. Tony Stark. The smell was the first thing to hit him. It wasn't the antiseptic sting of a standard hospital, nor the metallic tang of blood that had permeated the air during the war back home. It was the smell of ozone, fresh polymer, and expensive coffee. Izuku Midoriya lay still, keeping his breathing shallow and rhythmic. His eyes were closed, but his other senses were mapping the room with paranoid precision. Temperature, 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Controlled climate. Airflow coming from the northwest corner. Low hum of machinery, likely servers or high-output generators. Footsteps. 2 distinct patterns, one heavy, shuffling, rubber soles. One light, rhythmic, tactical boots. He was on a bed. It was softer than the cot at the evacuation center, but firmer than his bed at home. There were no restraints, which was a good sign, or a bad sign, implying they were confident he couldn't escape. His heart rate just stabilized. "He's awake," a female voice said. It was cool, detached, but not unkind. "Kid's got the metabolism of a hummingbird on a sugar rush," a male voice replied. It was deeper, carrying a weary edge. "The sedative I gave him should have kept a rhino down for 6 hours. It's been 40 minutes. Izuku opened his eyes. The ceiling was white, paneled with soft glow LED strips that adjusted automatically to his pupil dilation. He sat up slowly, wincing as the movement pulled at the bruises on his ribs. He was in a medical bay that looked more like a spaceship interior than a doctor's office. Glass walls, holographic displays floating in midair, and robotic arms retracted into the ceiling. Standing at the foot of the bed was a man in a purple button-down shirt and a lab coat, nervously cleaning his glasses. Beside him stood a woman with fiery red hair, wearing black tactical gear, Bruce Banner. Natasha Romanoff. Izuku recognized them from the brief descriptions Peter, Spider-Man, had given him, and from the general aura they projected. One felt like a storm contained in a bottle. The other felt like a blade hidden in silk. "Good morning, or evening, depending on your internal clock," the man, Dr. Banner, said, sliding his glasses back on. "I'm Dr. Bruce Banner. This is Natasha. Where am I?" Izuku asked, his voice rasping. He looked down. He was wearing gray sweatpants and a plain white t-shirt. His gauntlets and tattered costume were gone. "You're at the Avengers compound," Natasha answered, stepping forward. Her eyes scanned him, noting every micro-expression. "Upstate New York. You're safe. My gear." Izuku started, instinctively reaching for his arms. "It's in the workshop," Natasha said. "Stark is looking at it. He said the compression technology is quaint but effective." Izuku swung his legs over the side of the bed. He felt lightheaded. "I need to leave. I need to find a way back." "Back where?" Banner asked, pulling up a holographic chart. "We ran your blood work while you were out. And let me tell you, Izuku, can I call you Izuku? Your biology is fascinating. And by fascinating, I mean baffling." Banner tapped the air, and a 3D rendering of a DNA helix spun into view. "You have a double-jointed toe," Banner pointed out. "In modern medical science, that's usually a dominant trait that was phased out of the human genome decades ago. But your bone density, it's 4 times that of an average human. Your muscle fibers are wound tighter than anything I've seen outside of, well, me. It's because I'm quirkless," Izuku muttered without thinking. Banner and Natasha exchanged a look. "Quirkless?" Natasha repeated the word like it was a code. "Define that." Izuku looked up, realizing the disconnect. "In my world, humans evolved. 80% of the population has a power. A quirk. The lack of the extra toe joint is the primary indicator of a quirk factor. I have the joint, so I was born without power." "Born without power," Banner muttered, typing on a holographic keyboard. "But the energy we saw in Queens, the green lightning, the strength. That wasn't technology. I was given my power later," Izuku said. "It was the truth, but safe enough." "Given?" Natasha's eyes narrowed. "By who? A serum? Radiation? It's complicated." Izuku slid off the bed. His legs held. "I need to talk to Mr. Stark. Spider-Man said he understands the science." "Stark is waiting for you," Natasha said. "But first, we need to know if you're a threat. You took out 5 Hydra mercenaries with military precision. You move like a soldier." Izuku looked at his scarred hands. The twisted fingers, the burn marks, the lines of surgery where Recovery Girl couldn't fully heal him. "I'm not a soldier," Izuku said softly, looking Natasha in the eye. "I'm a hero." The conference room. The room was vast, dominated by a long table made of a single slab of glass. One wall was entirely a window looking out over the manicured lawns and the river beyond. Tony Stark sat at the head of the table, spinning a Stark Industries stylus between his fingers. He wasn't wearing the armor, but he wore a black tank top that showed the faint glow of the arc reactor housing in his chest. Even though he had removed the shrapnel, the habit of the tech remained. Izuku sat opposite him. Natasha stood by the door, arms crossed. Banner paced near a whiteboard covered in equations. Okay, let's review, Tony said, flicking the stylus toward a hologram in the center of the table. It was a recording of the singularity that brought Izuku here. This is a localized gravitational distortion, Tony began, his tone shifting into lecture mode. Detected by satellites over New York 3 hours ago. It has a Hawking radiation signature that matches a theoretical Einstein-Rosen bridge, but the energy flavor is all wrong. It tastes like, frankly, it tastes like magic. Thor stuff. He looked at Izuku. You said a warp quirk did this? Yes, Izuku said. He was trying not to geek out over the holographic interface. The projection resolution is incredible. No latency. Is it hard light or photon projection? The villain. His name is Shigaraki. He stole a warping ability. It malfunctioned when our attacks collided. Shigaraki, Tony tested the name. Sounds like a bad sushi roll. So, you're telling me you come from an Earth where 80% of people are X-Men, you dress like a green rabbit, and you punch people to save them. I don't just punch, Izuku corrected defensively. I save everyone. That's the job. Right. The job. Tony stood up and walked over to Izuku. He leaned in close. Let's talk about the job. Because in my experience, people with power who operate without oversight usually end up breaking things they can't fix. We call it the Ultron principle. Or the Banner problem. Hey, Banner protested mildly from the whiteboard. My world has oversight, Izuku said, his jaw tightening. We have the Hero Public Safety Commission. We have licenses. Regulations. I have a provisional license. A license, Tony scoffed. Cute. Like a driver's license for nuclear weapons. Tony tapped the table again. A new image appeared. It was a scan of Izuku's arms. The atmosphere in the room dropped 10 degrees. The scan showed the skeletal structure. It was a road map of trauma. Microfractures, heel breaks, shatter points where the bone had been pulverized and knit back together. I've seen mercenaries with 20 years of combat experience, Natasha said quietly from the door. They don't have scans like this. Tony looked at Izuku, the snark fading. Kid, how old are you? 16, Izuku answered. Tony stared at him. 16. And your arms look like you put them through a meat grinder. Did you do this? My power. One for all. Izuku touched his right arm. It was too strong for my body at first. If I used it, I broke. But I had to use it. People were in danger, so you broke yourself to save them, Steve Rogers said. Izuku jumped. He hadn't heard the door open. Standing in the entryway was a man who looked like a monument come to life. Broad shoulders, blonde hair, eyes that looked like they had seen too much but still held kindness. He wore a plain t-shirt and khakis, but he carried an air of authority that eclipsed even Stark. Captain America. Cap, Tony said, not turning around. Fashionably late. We were just discussing the kid's penchant for self-destruction. Steve walked into the room. He didn't look at the holograms. He looked at Izuku. I'm Steve Rogers, he said, extending a hand. Izuku stood up and took it. The grip was firm, reassuring. Izuku Midoriya. Tony tells me you're from a long way away, son, Steve said. But pain looks the same in every dimension. Izuku felt a lump in his throat. This man, he felt like All Might. Not the boisterous, laughing All Might, but the quiet, true All Might. The man who stood tall because he had to. I just want to go home, Izuku said, his voice trembling slightly. My friends, the war, they need me. War? Steve's gaze sharpened. We're fighting, everything, Izuku said. Society is collapsing. The villains broke out the prisons. If I'm not there, if you're not there, they'll fight on, Natasha said. That's what teams do. Tony clapped his hands, breaking the heavy mood. Okay, Weep Fest over. Here's the situation. We can't send you back yet. We don't have the math. The dimensional gateway theory is barely a hypothesis. I need time. Banner needs time. And we need data. Tony pointed a finger at Izuku. I need to know what you are. Specifically, I need to know if you're a walking nuke that's going to go off while I'm sleeping. Banner says your energy output fluctuates. I want to see it. You want me to fight? Izuku asked. I want you to spar, Tony corrected. Controlled environment. Monitoring equipment. If you can show me how this quirk works, maybe I can reverse engineer the energy signature to find your home frequency. Izuku looked at Steve. Steve nodded. It's the best play, Izuku. We need to know what we're dealing with. Izuku took a deep breath. He needed to get home. If fighting was the price of the ticket, he would pay it. Okay, Izuku said, his eyes hardening. I'll do it. But I need my costume. The training hangar, sub-level 4. The hangar was massive, a concrete box reinforced with vibranium weave plating. It was designed to contain the Hulk, or Thor on a bad day. Izuku stood in the center. He had his costume back on. It was cleaned, stark spots worked fast, but the tears and burns remained. He tightened the straps of his mid-gauntlets. They felt reassuringly heavy. Up in the observation deck, behind thick ballistic glass, stood the Avengers. Tony was at the console. Steve, Natasha, Bruce, and Sam Wilson, Falcon, who had just arrived, were watching. Recording started, Tony's voice echoed over the PA system. All right, Midoriya. The objective is simple. Neutralize the threats. Lethal force is authorized against the targets. They're robots. Do not destroy the walls. I just had them painted. Understood, Izuku shouted back. He closed his eyes. He visualized the lock. The first user. The fourth. The fifth. They were quiet, dormant, likely due to the dimensional dissonance, but the power was there. A stocking filled with gunpowder, one for all, full cowling. Green lightning sparked from his skin. His hair stood up. The air pressure in the room dropped. In the booth, the monitors spiked red. Energy output rising, Banner said, watching the needles jump. It's bioelectric, but look at the caloric burn. He's burning 500 calories a second just standing there. Let's see how he handles the Legion, Tony said. He pressed a button. Scenario, riot control. 6 doors opened around the perimeter of the hangar. Out marched 12 Stark drones. These were the Mark II sentries, sleek, silver, armed with repulsors and capture nets. They weren't Ultron, but they were fast and coordinated. They locked onto Izuku. Target acquired, the lead drone announced mechanically. Surrender. Izuku opened his eyes. The green glow flooded the room. Threat assessment, 12 hostiles. Ranged weaponry. Formation, encirclement. He didn't wait. Boom. He vanished. Where'd he go? Sam Wilson blinked. Ceiling, Natasha pointed. Izuku was clinging to the ceiling rafters using Black Whip. He hung upside down for a split second, analyzing the drone formation. Smash! He launched himself downward like a meteor. He landed in the center of the circle, but instead of striking the ground, he slammed his hands together. Air Force. The shockwave blew the 12 drones backward, disrupting their formation. One drone recovered instantly, firing a repulsor blast. Izuku didn't dodge. He weaved. He moved his head centimeters to the left, letting the beam singe his ear, and closed the distance. He grabbed the drone's arm, using the momentum of its own swing to flip it over his shoulder. He drove his knee into its central processor. Controlled impact. Enough to break circuits, not enough to explode the core. The drone went limp. 1, Izuku counted. 3 drones opened fire simultaneously. Danger sense. It buzzed, sharp and clear. Izuku engaged full cowling, 8%. He moved in a zigzag pattern, bouncing off the walls. Gran Torino style. He was a green blur, moving faster than the drone's tracking sensors could follow. He appeared behind 2 drones. Shoot style. He delivered a roundhouse kick that decapitated both robots cleanly. 3. 4. He's not using his hands, Steve noted, watching intently. He's protecting his arms. Using his legs for power, arms for guidance. Smart, Natasha admitted. He fights like a kickboxer mixed with a gymnast. Tony wasn't impressed yet. Let's turn up the heat. Protocol swarm. The remaining 8 drones stopped firing individually. They linked up, their repulsors syncing for a widespread omniblast. Izuku stopped moving. He stood facing the wall of incoming fire. He's gonna get hit, Sam said. Watch, Steve said. Izuku took a deep breath. Black Whip was versatile, but he needed cover. Smoke screen. Purple smoke exploded from his body, filling the hangar instantly. The drone's optical sensors were blinded. They fired blindly into the cloud. The blasts illuminated the purple fog, creating a strobe light horror show. Inside the smoke, Izuku was silent. He closed his eyes. Danger Sense painted a map of the room in his mind. Drone 5, 3 o'clock. Drone 6, 9 o'clock. He extended Black Whip. 7 tendrils shot out of the smoke. They wrapped around the drones, lifting them into the air. And down, Izuku yanked. The drones smashed into each other in midair with a deafening screech of metal. The smoke cleared. Izuku stood in the center of a pile of scrap metal. He hadn't taken a single hit. Tony whistled. Okay. Not bad. But can he handle a tank? Tony tapped a command. The floor in the center of the arena opened up. Rising from the pit was a massive, bulky robot. The Hulkbuster training dummy. It was slow, but it was practically indestructible and hit like a freight train. The dummy roared, a synthesized mechanical noise, and charged. Izuku looked at the behemoth. It reminded him of Muscular. Or the Noma at the USJ. Fear spiked in his chest. Flashback. The pain. The breaking bones. He shook it off. No. I am here. I am the user of One for All. One for All. 20%. The green lightning intensified, turning from a spark to a raging aura. The concrete beneath his feet cracked. He didn't run around the robot. He ran at it. The robot swung a fist the size of a small car. Izuku slid underneath the punch, the wind pressure ruffling his hair. He jumped, planting his feet on the robot's chest. No, just a simple smash. He drove a fist into the robot's neck joint, the weakest point he had analyzed in the split second of his approach. Crack! The head of the Hulkbuster dummy didn't just break off. It shot upward into the ceiling, embedding itself in the reinforced concrete. Izuku backflipped off the toppling giant, landing lightly on his feet. Target neutralized, Izuku said to the glass window. The room was silent. In the booth, Banner looked at the monitors. Tony, at the moment of impact, his power output spiked to levels equivalent to a tactical ballistic missile. And that was, what? 20%? Tony stared at the kid standing amidst the wreckage. He held back. He could have scrapped the whole unit. Tony keyed the mic. All right, kid. You pass. Show's over. Come get a juice box. The living quarters, common room. An hour later, Izuku sat on a plush leather sofa, holding an ice pack to his shoulder. He was wearing clean clothes, a Stark Industries hoodie that was slightly too big for him. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind the hollow ache of homesickness. The Avengers were scattered around the room. Tony was at the bar, pouring a drink. Natasha was reading a book. Steve was sketching in a notebook. You fought well, Steve said, breaking the silence. Your style, it's selfless. You put yourself in range to ensure the target goes down. It's the only way I know, Izuku said, looking at his hands. My mentor. All Might. He always said that meddling when you don't need to is the essence of being a hero. All Might, Steve repeated. He sounds like a good man. He's the best, Izuku said, a sad smile touching his lips. He smiled no matter how scary things got. To show people they were safe. Tony walked over, handing Izuku a tablet. I promise you data, Tony said. I'm running the numbers on the dimensional rift. But while that cooks, I thought you should know where you landed. Izuku took the tablet. What is this? History, Tony said, his voice unusually somber. Context. You keep talking about symbols of peace. We don't have those here. We have soldiers. We have spies. We have monsters. Izuku looked at the screen. It was a newsreel. Title, The Fall of Sokovia. Izuku watched. He saw a city rising into the sky. He saw robots swarming like locusts. He saw the Avengers fighting desperately. He saw buildings collapsing. He saw the dust. The screaming civilians. Then, he saw the aftermath. A crater where a city used to be. Memorials. People crying. But there was no singular figure standing atop the rubble laughing, saying it's fine now. There were just the Avengers, looking tired, beaten, and controversial. He swiped to the next video. The Battle of New York. Aliens pouring from the sky. The Hulk smashing through buildings. He swiped again. Washington, D.C. The fall of S.H.I.E.L.D. 3 helicarriers crashing into the Potomac. Izuku lowered the tablet. He felt a chill deep in his bones. This world. Izuku whispered. It's constantly at war. We tried to stop it, Steve said, standing up and walking to the window. We tried to save as many as we can. But we can't save everyone. In my world, Izuku said, All Might held society together by himself. Just his existence stopped crime. When he retired, everything fell apart. One man shouldn't have that much weight, Natasha said softly. It breaks them. Izuku looked at her. He thought of All Might's emaciated true form. He thought of his own breaking bones. I know, Izuku said. But someone has to carry it. He looked around the room at these heroes. They weren't celebrities. They didn't have rankings or merchandise. Well, Tony did, but that was different. They were tired people doing a hard job because no one else could. He felt a kinship with them. And a profound loneliness. How do you do it? Izuku asked. Without a symbol? Without a pillar? Tony took a sip of his drink. He looked at the arc reactor on the wall, then at Steve. We don't rely on a pillar, Tony said. We lean on each other. Or we try to. And sometimes we fail, Steve added. But we get back up. Izuku nodded slowly. Lean on each other. He thought of Class 1A, Uraraka, Ida, Bakugo, Todoroki. They were his pillars. And they were a universe away. I need to get back to them, Izuku said, his resolve hardening. They're fighting a war, and I'm sitting here safe. You're not sitting, Tony said. You're recovering. And you're helping us figure this out. Until we find the frequency, you're stuck here. So you might as well make yourself useful. Useful how? Well, Tony smirked. Spidey has been texting me non-stop asking if Greenie can come out to play. And frankly, the kid could use a sparring partner who doesn't pull his punches. Izuku blinked. You want me to train with Peter? I want you to stay busy, Tony said. An idle mind is the devil's workshop. Or in my case, it builds murder bots. Keep your head in the game, Midoriya. We'll get you home. Izuku looked down at the tablet one last time. He saw a picture of the Avengers standing together. Vestiges of valor, he thought. Remnants of heroism in a broken world. Okay, Izuku said. I'll train. I'll help. Good, Steve said. Get some rest, son. You start at 0600. And bring your running shoes. I'm going to show you that having a quirk isn't the only way to be fast. Izuku watched Steve walk out. He looked at Tony and Natasha. For the first time since falling from the sky, the panic in his chest subsided slightly. He wasn't home. He wasn't safe. But he wasn't alone. He lay back on the couch, staring at the ceiling. I'm coming, everyone. Just wait for me. Inside the core of One for All, a faint light flickered. A connection, weak and distant, but there. And in the shadows of a Hydra base in Eastern Europe, a monitor flickered to life. A grain video feed of a green lightning bolt in a Stark hangar played on a loop. A man with a monocle leaned forward, smiling. Fascinating. The price of freedom is high. It always has been. And it's a price I'm willing to pay. You told me you wanted to save everyone, son. Just remember that everyone includes you. Steve Rogers, 5 o'clock hours. The new Avengers facility. The nightmare was always the same. The sky was the color of a bruise, purple and black, swirling with dust and decay. Izuku stood on the precipice of a crumbling building in Jaku City. Below him, the world was ending. Decay spread like a cancer across the ground, turning concrete, steel, and flesh into gray dust. Shigaraki was there. His white hair danced in the wind, his eyes red pools of madness. But it wasn't just Shigaraki. Behind him, looming like a shadow over the sun, was him. All for one. You are empty, Izuku Midoriya. The voice boomed, vibrating through Izuku's bones. You are a vessel for ghosts. And ghosts cannot save the living. Izuku tried to move, to call upon Black Whip, to summon the strength of the predecessors. But his limbs were heavy, encased in lead. He looked down at his hands. They were dissolving. His fingers were turning to ash, blowing away in the wind. He opened his mouth to scream. Izuku gasped, bolting upright in bed. Air. He needed air. His lungs heaved, dragging in the cool, filtered oxygen of the room. His hand flew to his chest, clutching the fabric of the Stark Industries t-shirt, feeling the frantic hammer rhythm of his heart. Thump, thump, thump. He was alive. He was solid. Analysis, he whispered to the empty room, a grounding technique he had developed during the lonely nights on the run. Location, upstate New York. Status, safe. Threat, none immediate. He swung his legs over the edge of the bed. The room was dark, save for the faint blue standby light of the holographic interface on the wall. The silence was absolute. In Tokyo, or Muzutafu, there was always the hum of the city. Here, in the secluded woods, the silence was heavy. It felt like holding your breath. Izuku looked at the digital clock, 5:03 a.m. Sleep was a lost cause. The vestiges were silent again. Usually, the first user or Nana Shimura would offer a comforting presence in his dreams, or the fourth would buzz a warning, but since arriving in this dimension, the connection felt muted. Like trying to hear a radio station through static. He knew the power was there, the stockpile was full, but the personalities were distant. He felt incredibly alone. Izuku stood up, grabbing a pair of running shorts and shoes Tony had provided. Movement helped. Movement was the only thing that kept the thoughts at bay. The grounds of the facility were shrouded in a thick morning mist. The Hudson River was a gray ribbon in the distance, obscured by the fog. The air was crisp, smelling of pine needles and damp earth. Izuku stepped out onto the tarmac, stretching his arms. His joints popped. The deep ache in his bones was a familiar companion, but the advanced medical gel Dr. Cho had applied the day before had worked wonders on the surface bruising. He started to run. He didn't use one for all. No green lightning. No Mach speed bursts. Just the rhythmic slap of rubber soles on pavement. Left, right, inhale, exhale. He ran a lap around the perimeter fence. Then another. He let his mind drift, analyzing the security measures. Motion sensors every 50 yards. Thermal cameras. That tree line is a blind spot for the main tower, but likely covered by drone patrol. Your stride is uneven. The voice came from behind him. Izuku flinched, instinctively hopping to the side and spinning around, his hands coming up in a guard. Steve Rogers jogged out of the mist. He wore a gray long-sleeved shirt and sweatpants. He wasn't even winded. Steve slowed to a halt, raising a hand in a placating gesture. Easy, soldier. It's just me. Izuku lowered his guard, relaxing his shoulders. Captain. Mr. Rogers. I didn't hear you approach. You weren't supposed to, Steve said with a small smile. And please call me Steve. Mr. Rogers makes me feel like a children's TV host. Izuku blinked. I understood that reference. Steve laughed, a genuine, warm sound. Tony made me watch it. Said I needed cultural catching up. Mind if I join you? No, sir. I mean, Steve. They fell into step together. For a few minutes, they ran in silence. The only sound was their breathing and the crunch of gravel. Izuku couldn't help but steal glances at the man beside him. Captain America. In the history books Tony had shown him, this man was a legend. A living relic of World War II. He had fought HYDRA, aliens, and robots. He was the leader of the Avengers, but running next to him, he didn't feel like a god. He felt solid. Grounded. You're favoring your right leg, Steve observed, breaking the silence without looking over. Compensating for the fracture in your left femur? Or is it the ankle? Izuku looked down at his feet. Both, I think. I broke my legs a few times. The doctor said the structural integrity is compromised. I read your file, Steve said. Or what Tony could put together from your scans. You've taken a lot of punishment for a kid your age. It was necessary, Izuku said automatically. Was it? The question hung in the air. If I didn't break, Izuku said, his voice tightening, others would have died. My body, It can heal. Or it can be fixed. But if a civilian dies, that's it. There's no fixing that. Steve didn't answer immediately. He picked up the pace slightly. Izuku matched him easily, his breath steady. I used to be small, Steve said suddenly. Izuku looked at him. The man was a mountain of muscle. You, 5'4". 90 pounds soaking wet, Steve nodded. I had asthma. Scoliosis. Heart arrhythmia. I couldn't run 50 feet without wheezing. I got beaten up in alleys in Brooklyn more times than I can count. Izuku's eyes widened. But, you're Captain America. I am now, Steve said. But the serum didn't make me who I am, Izuku. It just amplified what was there. I was chosen because I knew what it felt like to be powerless. Dr. Erskine, the man who made me, he said that a weak man knows the value of strength, and knows compassion. Izuku felt a shockwave go through him. It was almost exactly what All Might had told him on the beach that day. You can be a hero. I was quirkless, Izuku confessed. The words tumbled out before he could stop them. Before I got my power, I was nothing. I was just a fanboy with a notebook. Everyone told me to give up. Even All Might, at first. Steve glanced at him, his blue eyes sharp and understanding. But you didn't give up. No. I moved without thinking. My body just moved to save someone. Steve smiled. That's it. That's the job. Everything else, the powers, the lightning, the shield, that's just tools. The instinct to move? You can't teach that. They reached the edge of the lake. Steve stopped, leaning against the railing. The sun was just beginning to crest over the trees, painting the water in gold and orange. Tell me about him, Steve said. This All Might. Izuku leaned on the railing next to him. He looked at the sunrise, but he saw the towering figure of Tashinori Yagi in his prime. He was everything, Izuku began. In my world, crime was everywhere. People were scared. Then he appeared. He was 7 feet tall, always smiling. He saved everyone. He won every fight. He became the symbol of peace. Izuku traced a line on the wooden railing. Crime rates dropped just because he existed. Villains were too scared to act because they knew he was watching. He held up the entire sky by himself. He was the pillar that supported society. And now? Steve asked softly. He retired, Izuku whispered. He used up his power fighting his nemesis. The embers went out. And when the pillar vanished, the sky fell. Izuku gripped the railing tight enough to make the wood groan. Chaos returned. The villains came back, bolder than before. People realized that their safety was an illusion held up by one man. They lost faith in heroes. They started to hate us. That's why I have to go back. I have to be the new pillar. I have to fix it. Steve listened intently. He crossed his massive arms over his chest, his expression unreadable. A symbol of peace, Steve mused. That's a heavy title. Too heavy for one man. He carried it, Izuku defended. And it broke him, Steve countered gently. Didn't it? Izuku flinched. He thought of the blood All Might coughed up. The hollow cheeks. The scars. He did what he had to do. I know, Steve said. He turned to face Izuku fully. Back in the 40s, they'd put me in a costume. Called me Captain America. Had me punch Hitler on a stage to sell war bonds. I was a symbol. A mascot. People looked at me and saw America. They saw victory. Steve's eyes darkened slightly. But symbols are static, Izuku. They're pictures on a poster. People are messy. People fail. When I went into the ice, I was a hero. When I woke up, the world had changed. The government I fought for, S.H.I.E.L.D., it turned out to be infested with the very enemy I thought I defeated. Izuku remembered the history file. Hydra. If you build a society on one man, Steve said, placing a hand on Izuku's shoulder, you build it on a fault line. Because men die. Men retire. Men make mistakes. So what do you do? Izuku asked, his voice thick with emotion. If you don't have a symbol, who gives people hope? We do, Steve said firmly. Not as a single god above them, but as people standing beside them. The Avengers, we aren't perfect. We argue. We fight. But we stand together, And when we fall, someone else steps up. It's not a pillar, Izuku. It's a web. A web. Izuku thought of Spider-Man. He thought of Class 1A. You're trying to carry the weight of your whole world on your back, Steve said. I can see it in your posture. You're waiting for the next blow. But if you try to be All Might, if you try to be the solitary god, you'll burn out. And a burnout hero can't save anyone. Izuku looked down. Tears pricked at the corners of his eyes. He wiped them away furiously. I don't know how to do it any other way. One for all, it's a power meant to be carried alone. It's a torch passed in the dark. Then maybe it's time to light some other torches, Steve said. You have friends back home? Yes. Trust them. And while you're here, trust us. Steve pushed off the railing. Come on. Let's hit the gym. I want to see if that super strength of yours applies to boxing. I'll teach you how to punch without breaking your knuckles. Izuku looked at Steve. For the first time, the crushing weight of the dark Deku mantle felt lighter. Not gone, but shared. Yes, sir, Izuku said. Steve, the captain corrected over his shoulder. On your left. Steve took off sprinting. Izuku smiled, a real smile, and engaged full calling, 5%. On your left. He shot past Steve in a streak of green. Cheater! Steve yelled, laughing. 10 o'clock hours. The lab. The peaceful atmosphere of the morning run didn't last. It shattered the moment they walked into the lab. Tony Stark was manic. That was the only word for it. He was surrounded by holographic displays of complex fractal geometry, drinking what looked like a sludge of chlorophyll and caffeine. Ah, the Boy Scout and the rabbit arrive, Tony said without looking up. Good run? Bond over your mutual love of justice and inability to understand pop culture references post-2000? Great. Good morning to you too, Tony, Steve said, grabbing a towel. Any progress? Progress is a relative term, Tony said, swiping a hologram away. He beckoned them over. Look at this. He pulled up a magnified image of Izuku's blood cells. This is your blood, kid. Normal red blood cells, white blood cells, platelets. And this? He pointed to a faint, glowing shimmer around the cells. Is the energy signature of your quirk. It looks unstable, Izuku noted. It's not just unstable. It's radioactive. Not in the melt-your-face-off way, but in the broadcast signal way. Tony looked at Izuku seriously. Your cells are storing energy that defies the law of conservation. But here's the kicker. Since you arrived in this dimension, the energy isn't replenishing as fast as it should. Izuku frowned. What do you mean? I mean, in your world, there's likely a background radiation or a biological constant that feeds this power. Here? You're a battery running on reserves. You're leaking energy, Izuku. Every time you use that lightning, you're draining a tank that isn't being refilled. Izuku felt a cold knot in his stomach. So, I'll run out, eventually. Or your body will start cannibalizing its own bioenergy to compensate. Which means organ failure. Death. The usual cheerful stuff. Steve stepped forward, his face hard. How do we fix it? We get him home, Tony said. Fast. I'm building a dimensional stabilizer. It should act as a funnel to tap into the residual energy of the singularity that brought him here. But I need a power source, something massive, like an arc reactor? Izuku asked. Bigger. I'm thinking I might need to borrow something from Thor. Or tap into the main grid of the eastern seaboard. Suddenly, the alarms blared. Incoming transmission. A Faraday's voice cut through the room. Priority Alpha. Encrypted channel. Source unknown. Put it on screen, Tony ordered. The main wall monitor flickered. Static hissed, then resolved into an image. It was a video feed. But it wasn't a communication. It was surveillance footage. It showed Izuku. It was footage from the night before, in the alleyway in Queens. It showed him using Black Whip. It showed his face, clearly illuminated by the lightning. Then, the image changed. It showed a split screen. On the left, Izuku. On the right, a grainy, black and white video from the 1940s. It was Captain America, ripping a car door off its hinges. A voice, distorted and metallic, spoke over the video. The shield was the beginning. The serum was the key. But evolution, Evolution cannot be stopped. We have found the bridge. The screen went black. Then, a single symbol appeared. A skull with tentacles. Hydra. Steve went rigid. The playful camaraderie from the morning vanished, replaced by the terrifying stillness of a soldier at war. Trace it, Steve ordered. His voice was ice. Already on it, Tony said, his fingers flying across a holographic keyboard. Signal bounced off 3 satellites. Russia, Madripoor, Latveria, wait. Got a ghost ping. Northern Romania. An old Soviet bunker. Hydra, Izuku whispered. He looked at the symbol. It looked like the mark of a villain organization. Who are they? They're the ghosts I told you about, Steve said grimly. Nazis. Terrorists. They believe that humanity can't be trusted with freedom. They want order through submission, and they have footage of you, Natasha said, walking into the room. She had been listening from the doorway. They're comparing you to Steve. They think you're a super soldier. They don't know about quirks, Tony realized. They think he's a successful replication of the Erskine serum. Or something better. They want his blood, Banner added, stepping out from the adjacent biolab. If they think they can synthesize a serum from him, they'll come for him, Steve finished. Izuku looked at the screen. I put you in danger. By being here. No, Steve said. He turned to Izuku. You didn't do anything. Hydra is the threat. And if they want a fight, we'll give them one. We can't just storm a bunker in Romania based on a ghost ping, Tony argued. The Accords are already a nightmare in the drafting stages. If the Avengers cross borders without UN approval to chase a ghost, this isn't a ghost, Tony. Steve snapped. This is Hydra targeting a kid who is a walking WMD. Tony shouted back. Look at the big picture, Rogers. If we go in there guns blazing, we validate every fear the government has about us. We need to verify. The tension in the room was suffocating. Izuku watched them. The cracks in the foundation. The web Steve talked about was strained. I can go, Izuku said quietly. Everyone looked at him. I don't exist in this world, Izuku said. I don't have a file. I'm not subject to your accords. If I go. Absolutely not, Steve and Tony said in unison. You're injured, Natasha pointed out. And you're leaking energy. I can sneak in, Izuku insisted. I have a quirk for that. Smokescreen. And I can float. I can get in, find out what they have, and get out. It's too dangerous, Steve said. We do this together, or not at all. Tony, verify the signal. Use the Legion if you have to. Natasha, reach out to your contacts. Find out who is running that cell. Steve looked at Izuku. You are staying here. Under lockdown. Is that clear? Izuku hesitated. He wanted to argue. He wanted to say that waiting was what got people killed. But he looked at Steve's face, the genuine concern, the protective instinct. Yes, sir, Izuku lied. Somewhere in the Carpathian Mountains. Hydra Research Outpost 4. The bunker was deep underground, shielded by lead and miles of rock. The air was cold and smelled of rust. Dr. List, older now grayer, but still zealous, stood over a bank of monitors. The transmission was received? He asked. Yes, Doctor. The Avengers intercepted it, as planned, a subordinate replied. Good. Stark's ego will demand he analyze it. Roger's morality will demand he act. They will be distracted. List turned to the large glass containment unit in the center of the room. Inside, a figure sat strapped to a chair. It wasn't human. It was a synthesis. A creature of gray skin, exposed muscle, and cybernetic implants. A crude imitation of a gnome, though List didn't know the word. He called it the adaptoid. The boy's energy signature. It is the key, List muttered, looking at the stolen data from the Queen's fight. It is not just strength. It is energy storage. If we can extract that biological capability, we can stabilize the Winter Soldier program. We can create an army. He turned to a shadowy figure standing in the corner of the room. A man with a metal arm, standing perfectly still. The asset? Prepare the extraction team, List ordered. We are not waiting for them to come to us. We are going to New York. We are going to take the boy. The Winter Soldier didn't speak. He just nodded. 2200 hours. Avengers facility. Izuku's room. Izuku sat on his bed. He was fully dressed in his repaired costume. Tony had fixed the gauntlets, reinforcing the bracers with a gold titanium alloy. It felt lighter, stronger. He couldn't stay. Steve was right about the team, but Tony was right about the politics. Izuku had listened. He had analyzed. The Avengers were on the brink of a civil war of their own. If they went to Romania for him, it would cause an international incident. It might break the team apart. He couldn't be the reason the symbol of peace in this world cracked. I have to protect them, Izuku whispered. That's what a hero does. He opened the window. It was 3 stories down to the grass. He looked back at the room. He had left a note on the pillow. It was short. Thank you for the shoes. Thank you for the hope. I'm sorry. Izuku climbed onto the sill. Danger sense buzzed. Not a warning of an attack, but a warning of a mistake. Or maybe just guilt. One for all, full cowling. 5%. He dropped into the night, disappearing into the tree line. He didn't know where Romania was. But he knew how to find bad guys. He would draw them out. He would be the bait. As he ran through the woods, away from the only safety he had found, Izuku thought of Steve's words. If you try to be the solitary god, you'll burn out. Maybe, Izuku whispered to the wind. But if I burn out, at least I'll provide a light for a little while. He vanished into the darkness, a lone streak of green lightning in a gray world.